Hey, listeners. So, Mark Bray and I recorded this episode on Friday. Already then, the Washington Examiner and Andy Ngo were taking advantage of Trump's recent executive order and national security memorandum targeting anti-fascists and many others to get back to grinding that old Antifa axe, trying to frame up Mark as the terror professor and, believe it or not, financier of Antifa terrorist networks. At the time, on Friday, Mark was still feeling relatively safe in New Jersey, but was also taking some wise security precautions encouraged by Rutgers University, where he works, following a threat to his life. Today is Monday, the 6th, and the situation has, unfortunately, greatly intensified. Due to allegations and obsessive coverage from Turning Point USA, Jack Posobiec, Fox News, you get it, and for his own safety and that of his family, they have decided to relocate to Europe for the time being. This was publicly revealed in a particularly slimy Twitter post by none other than Milo Yiannopoulos, who seems to have taken a break from antagonizing fellow Nazis to share a private message between Mark and his students that announced his departure. I can't help but reflect on the eeriness of doing an episode about an educator who was falsely accused of being a terrorist mastermind with an educator who is being falsely accused of being a terrorist mastermind. So I guess I just want to remind listeners that, well, as Cardi once said, shit's getting real, and you don't actually have to do anything violent or even really confrontational to get singled out in this political climate. But Mark Bray is still gonna Mark Bray, no matter where he is. And I hope that y'all are still gonna y'all, wherever you are. But please take care of yourselves, mind your P's and Q's, and maybe throw Mark and the fam a little love by buying one of his excellent books from the links provided in the show description if you can spare it to, maybe help ease the move a little. But enough about 2025. Let's get weird in 19th century Spain for a minute. All right, welcome to The State Between Us. I am your host, Fritz McLinden. I'm joined here by historian Mark Bray. Let me say hi, and I'll introduce you properly.
Hey, Fritz. It's a pleasure to be here in virtual space with you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mark, it's been a while since the old show. Haven't talked to you, and I don't know why, but lately I've just been thinking about you. I don't know what it is.
Why could it be?
Why could it be? Yeah. So I figured I'd hit you up and reconnect, but also just squeeze an episode out of you, a little story. But before we get to that, maybe just for any listeners that don't know you, Mark Bray is a historian working out of Rutgers, who is the author of, at least in English, you've got 4 books out. Is that correct?
That's right. And then there's some translations. Yeah.
Yes. Probably your most well-known one is Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, which came out in 2017. And
yes.
That one kind of follows you around to this day, I would say.
It does. Even when I try to escape it, it follows me, yes.
Yes, even when you go ahead and write the Anarchist Inquisition, Assassins, Activists, and Martyrs in Spain and France, which was published through Cornell University Press back in 2022, which was the last time I talked to you.
Yes, and also for your listeners, the paperback edition came out with AK Press. So
that's awesome.
And it actually, not only is it more affordable, I believe, but there's a chapter that was too long for the Cornell edition that AK let me include. So it's actually more complete. So you can get that from AK.
Well, I was just about to brag that I read the whole thing cover to cover, but that's no longer true, apparently.
No, it's close enough.
Okay. All right. It's a really great book. Highly recommend.
Thank you.
And it's not the only time you've kind of recovered a lot of forgotten history, especially from the anarchist movement or even anarchist. Anarchist movement. I don't want to qualify it too much. And I mean, of course, what we're going to be talking about today, which was the subject of your book, Anarchist Education in the Modern School, a Francisco Ferrer reader. This is a guy I've been meaning to talk to you about for a while because I feel, I guess, this book, just to tell readers why it's important. There hasn't been, especially in English, monographic works about Ferrer's like biography and a compendium of his work together, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's largely true. And the professional historian in me wants to clarify, this is not a monograph per se so much as it is a collection of his writings.
Yes.
Many of which have never been translated into English before. And a full, complete translation of his famous book, The Modern School. The previous English edition was only part of it, and historical essays about him. So it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But for anyone who's interested in the subject, I think you'll do pretty well checking out this book.
Yes, and for me, it was important because when I was coming up and sort of figuring out my politics, especially around pedagogy, especially around education, because that's been an important part of my life. I was an educator for a very long time. I've educated most ages and grades and, points of people's lives. And Ferrer, the bits you would get of him in English were quite curated,
That's entirely correct.
Yeah.
So part of the problem with I think it was 1913 or 1914 translation of The Modern School, which is the one that basically everyone who read him in English would read over the coming decades, was about 2/3 of the book. To be fair, most of what was left out were sections of other people's work that Ferrer included as a way of illustrating some sort of point. So I kind of get it. But the more important issue is that there were some kind of seemingly deliberate mistranslations where the translator tried to tone down the kind of radicalism of a few of Ferrer's points on a few issues. And so then the idea was to try and get this impression of Ferrer as this kind of neutral, free-thinking, pedagogical figure. Mm-hmm. And that served the purpose, of course, of rehabilitating his image after he was condemned by the Spanish state as being this radical firebrand. But as I talk about in the introduction to the book, the main caricatures of who he was, whether from anarchists, whether from the state, or from these kind of liberal, free-thinking centrist types, they were all kind of misleading.
Yeah. And also, I think on the other side, even the things that I would read from anarchist sources tended to leave out certain aspects of his life that I didn't know about until I read your book. For instance, his, the sides that actually were kind of more in that typical liberal bourgeois realm, some of the limitations of his ideas on gender equality, maybe stuff like that,
Right. Well, he was this kind of complex character who was influenced by a variety of different ideological perspectives, who was very much a product of his times, who in some ways could kind of see beyond the limitations of his historical horizons, and other ways could not. So I mean, there's, like with any historical actor, like if people, 300 years from now, hoping that people still write history, then look back on us, I'm sure they'll see things that haven't aged well with us as well. That's the nature of it. But to ignore it is a problem. And, as an aside, I did this panel, online panel. I think it was on the anniversary of The Modern School. It was organized out of Brazil. And I was on this panel with this older Catalan scholar of Ferrer who published some of the works that I referenced in this book in the 70s. Uh-huh. And I brought up the fact that, Ferrer was friendly with and spoke highly of this guy Ernst Haeckel, who was like this famous scientific racist who did charts of like the different skulls, like the classic like skull charts.
Yes.
And I was like, yo, that's a problem.
Yes.
And the guy wouldn't hear it.
Yeah. I can't sympathize, really. Like I really want to know this, There's a tendency to make hagiographies out of our people, and I know that we're in I'm guilty of this even on this show. I mean, I've been joking the other day with my partner that for a show that claims to sort of not be into the idea of martyrdom, I certainly have a lot of them on the show. Like I've got a lot of my people are, eventually executed by the state.
Yeah. And I mean, everything in moderation, right? Like to some extent, right? Yeah, right. Moderation. Some of our comrades have been tragically slain by their enemies. And I think for what it's worth, it's fine to like honor that. But obviously, of course, there is a point at which it becomes a problem. And,
Yeah, I don't want it to become its own reason for activity. Martyrdom should not be the point of the cause. It's not the call, right? The call is a better, more equitable world.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. But as another friend of mine pointed out when I was complaining about this, she said, well, we just keep losing. So, I mean, that might be too harsh. I feel like the mood now is when we fight, we win. Like I think that's a nice call, and I'm with that. But we do lose sometimes. That is true.
Something you might not know about me, Fritz, is that I'm actually also a sports fan.
There we go.
And so that is, sometimes my teams in that realm win, and I'll take it where I can get it.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, and also some of these losses aren't. I mean, the thing is we're going to talk about a guy who does absolutely fit the bill of a martyr. But that's not what I want to leave his story with. Like, I want to leave it with understanding what he contributed and where, we can do better and keep that going, as happened in his actual life. So we haven't really introduced him yet as a person, but I just want to say before we jump in that, Mark, I know you're very busy these days and it's quite chaotic in your life. So I thank you a lot for joining. I know that you're working away at the anti-fascist super soldier serum every day, and we appreciate your effort there.
Yeah, just got to get it to taste right.
Well, sure. Yeah, that's always the problem of a consensus-based serum. Nobody can agree on the flavor. It's when it all falls apart, as you wrote in Translating Anarchy. It's another book of yours that I quite enjoyed. And I also want to say, before I let you get into this, that, and this is more for my listeners, that Mark's a very good writer. I highly recommend.
Thank you, Fritz.
It's true. Like, you make things to be read. I very much appreciate that. I devour, oh my God, so much text preparing for episodes on this show that anytime I read something that I actually like reading, it's like taking a bath. So I thank you for that.
Appreciate that, and I'm glad you got clean with my work.
I do. I always do. That's why you're here, actually. Yeah. So let's talk about this guy. Let's talk about who Francisco Ferrer was. This is a man, just to maybe kick it off, who was active during the second half of the 19th century, and then took one for the team, let's say, in 1909. So we're talking about. This is pre-fascism. This is pre-anti-fascism, named as such. This is somehow, to me, some of the foundations of what would become anti-fascism. And maybe you have something more.
Yeah, I do.
Intelligent to say
I actually do think there is a tie into anti-fascism here, and there is, in a different way, a bit of a tie into fascism. But maybe we can get to that after we kind of set the stage for the listeners a little more. So Ferrer is most famous for two things. One is he founded the Escuela Moderna, or the Modern School, in Barcelona in 1901, which was a groundbreaking school for elementary school age children that eventually, although not immediately, was premised upon being coeducational for boys and girls, which was a bit unusual in Spain, on rejecting rewards and punishments, a focus on science, rationality, and the natural world, as opposed to the dominant Catholic educational system in Spain. It was this kind of, at least on paper, this kind of egalitarian rationalist elementary school. I'm sure
the church loved it.
Oh my gosh.
Immediately gave their full support to this Masonic enlightenment.
well, yeah, we can get into the Mason stuff later. He was a very important Freemason, which does factor into the story.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
But I mean, in a sense, the meme with I think it's from Predator, right? The meme with the two strong arms holding hands in the middle, and it's like two sides, right? So you could get anarchists in the Catholic Church, and they're holding their strong arms together, and in the middle is ideas create behavior.
Yeah.
Right? And they both absolutely fervently believe this at the time. And so you have the anarchists on the one side thinking that, like, if we create this rationalist school, we're going to train young people to be revolutionaries. And then the other side, the Catholics being like, if they create this rationalist school, they're going to create young people who are revolutionaries.
Right.
So they kind of agreed on that premise, but of course, they both were very upset about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe just to mention the modern school concept. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that it survived past his widow, but it had an afterlife that affected other educators and other people that wanted to make their own schools. I think that includes maybe even Emma Goldman and Berkman's school.
It does.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I mean, in order to kind of wind our way there, it's important to clarify that for reasons we can get into, the school was shut down in 1906. But nevertheless, Ferrer continued his political activities. He was eventually accused of being the mastermind behind this massive rebellion in Barcelona in 1909, which came to be known as the Tragic Week. And he was executed by the Spanish state. And his martyrdom at the hands of the Spanish state played a huge role in propelling his pedagogical ideas around the world. And so that's like a necessary step to the point where what came to be known as the modern school movement explodes around the world. There's a series of schools established, across the US, in Latin America, North Africa, Europe, apparently even East Asia, that were, to one extent or another, and I want to emphasize that, to one extent or another, based on Ferrer's ideas, because in practice they varied widely. But one of the longest lasting of the Ferrerian schools was created by a group in New York City, which included, I think, definitely Alexander Berkman, I believe also Emma Goldman. I think they started around 1912 or so, but Berkman was involved in a plot to blow up Rockefeller,
right,
which did not work out. And so they got a lot of heat for that, and they ended up moving the school from New York to New Jersey, right near where Rutgers University is.
Oh.
And so it lasted from about 1914 or so, I may be getting these dates a little off, until I think after World War II. So it was there for several generations.
Well, when did Berkman shoot Henry Clay Frick?
Well, that was a Homestead strike. He was out of prison by this point.
Yeah. That was 1890 something. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting
right. So to spend a while in prison and then come out and still do something like that says a lot.
Dude, Berkman was nuts. I love him. Anyway. But I think some of the buildings still exist, and there are occasionally events to honor the memory of the Stelton Modern School. And for anyone who's really curious, the papers of the Stelton Modern School, including a number of the periodicals published by the students themselves, are at the Alexander Library at Rutgers University. You can consult them. All right. Do you know, and this is a podcast that takes archives very seriously, do you know if they have online archives available for viewing?
I do not know, but if anyone's interested in doing that, if you reach out to Alexander Library at Rutgers University about that collection, you can inquire.
Cool. I will do that, actually. All right. So Francisco didn't begin, obviously, as some free-thinking international icon.
He did not.
And certainly, I don't know, I would be interested to know, maybe when we do talk about his life, what you think he would have thought about his legacy today, but maybe better to start with, his gigantic family, maybe. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, well, I mean, as an aside, I think he would be a little annoyed by my book, and because it's not just it's not just a hagiography.
A proud man. Right? He was a proud man.
He was, and I don't think he would have taken too kindly to being critiqued or questioned, but so it goes. Yeah, he was, I think, was the 13th out of 14 children.
Yeah, crazy.
A large
Catholic children.
A large Catalan family, and it was by all accounts a conservative family, where he went to a very conservative grade school that was heavy on the discipline. And he would say later that his experience at this conservative Catholic school created in him this kind of rebellious fire that he wanted to create a much better school when he was older. Of course, whenever historical figures say things about their childhood as adults, you always have to take it with a grain of salt. But, obviously it must have been an influence.
It's also true, too, at the time that kind of school was school. Like, there you had maybe some non-clerical schools around in Spain at this time, but yeah, most of them were clerical and hyper-conservative reactionary hellholes.
Right, yeah, right. It was pretty much a theocracy. So not much of that. Now, for listeners who are not super familiar with the sort of evolution of anarchism in Spain, a lot of it came out of a pre-existing Republican movement. And in this context, Republican doesn't mean like the same as the GOP in the US. Republican in the sense of wanting a republic in Spain instead of a monarchy. Yeah. And so there had been agitation around this for a while. From 1873 into 74, there was a very short-lived first republic. So for those of you interested in the Spanish Civil War, the republic from 1931 to 39 is referred to as the Second Republic. Right. The first one was in the 1870s. And so basically, without getting into all the minutia, Ferrer gets exposed to these Republican ideas as a young person, as a teenager, and gravitates towards them. And eventually that becomes his politics. After the failure of the First Spanish Republic, there are a bunch of Republicans who basically make peace with the Restoration monarchy, integrate themselves to one extent or another into the new electoral system. And then there are some that do not. Manuel Ruiz Zorrilla was one of the most famous ones who continued to rebel against the Spanish monarchy in the 1870s into the 1880s. And his vision of revolutionary transformation was basically to try and win over the military, to win over the army to the Republican cause and have like a top-down Republican coup. Okay. Right. And so that's the milieu that Ferrer enters into. But
can I ask? Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm finding some interesting genealogical branches maybe that might lead into ideas about maybe the general strike as well. Like, so I'm thinking, was there a an ideological valorization of the military as well that came along with this Republican notion? Like, was this the motor of history, or was it more of a practical, tactical, like this is how power moves sort of thing?
My impression is it's some of both.
Okay. All right.
And we can talk in a little bit when we want to get to the proto-fascism tie-in.
Well, that's kind of where I was going. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're on the same page today, Fritz.
All right, fantastic.
That there is some of that for sure. So anyway, that's sort of his ideological world. He ends up fleeing to France. He claimed it was because of political intrigues. It seems probably more likely it was marital problems, but it could have been some of both. Who knows?
Was this when he was married to poor Teresa?
Yes.
Yeah.
His relationships with women were not great.
Not great. A lot to be desired there.
He seems to have had some shortcomings as a partner and perhaps shortcomings as a parent. I try to allow space for that kind of interpretation without, I wasn't there. I don't know the ins and outs, but certainly not a good situation. He ends up in France in the mid 1890s. And by this point, the kind of world of Republican conspiracies with the military has fizzled itself out. The last major attempt at that is 1886. And he has a brief flirtation with socialism in France, but then by the late 1890s gets more interested in anarchism. And this is an interesting time in Western European anarchist history, because this is right after the era of the attentat or the attacks in France, where Emile Henry and Ravachol and
Cafe
some of those
bombing, Parliament bombing.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So there's this wave of French anarchist bombings. Of course, only a handful of people actually did the bombing, but they had an outsized impact.
This is where we get the phrase "no innocent bourgeoisie," if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that was. I think that was Emile Henry.
Oof,
that's the title of one of my chapters. As an aside, I teach a course at Rutgers on terrorism.
Right, which is a perfect thing to be teaching right now.
Yeah, so this semester I'm teaching a course on terrorism, a course on anarchism, and a course on anti-fascism.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, terrorism is not a term that I think is actually politically useful anymore, but I use it to get the students in the door. But we did a session. We did a session on these anarchists, and I talked about this Emile Henri's Cafe Terminus bombing, where basically he was walking down the street with a bomb in Paris. He knew he wanted to blow up bourgeois people.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of looking from cafe to cafe, and he came upon one that said, "Oh, there's some people in there." He went in there, he had a dinner, and he ran out. The servers thought he was trying to skip on his bill. He turned around and threw a bomb, and I think it actually only killed a couple people, but it injured a bunch. Anyway,
I mean, still, it's
but there were a lot of anarchists at the time who were very critical of it.
Yeah.
And I think it was Charles Malato who said that you couldn't have, like, a mortal enemy of anarchism could not have damaged anarchism more than this act did. But it's interesting, I think, from a kind of political violence terrorism perspective, because there's this phrase, strategically indiscriminate, that this scholar of terrorism uses to describe acts which pick a group, in this context, the bourgeoisie, but are indiscriminate within that group. And I think it's an interesting theoretical framework for thinking about political violence. Anyway, that was a major digression. But
very helpful though, because I mean, it is an important thing to remember, is that the indiscriminacy is part of the point. The idea is like you're terrorizing an entire class of people.
Right now, of course, there is the question of like how we define that class, and is it necessarily the case that simply by virtue of being in that cafe in Paris that day that you were there for, we can talk about that.
And should a guy walking around with a bomb in his pocket be the one to decide? I feel like there's a larger discussion.
I think we can say no to that.
Yeah, probably
not. That's the easiest answer, is a no.
Agreed.
So that led the French government, and also the Spanish government, we're talking about France for the moment, to create these kind of anti-anarchist laws. Several anarchists were executed. It was a whole thing. And the like prestige of propaganda by the deed in the French anarchist movement declined. In its wake, you get a turn towards revolutionary syndicalism and anarchist pedagogy, anarchist educational initiatives.
Yeah.
And that's what was percolating in Paris in the late 1890s in the anarchist milieu. And that's where Ferrer was. And he would end up being hugely influenced by both revolutionary syndicalism, the idea of the general strike, and anarchist pedagogy. And so when he ended up going back to Spain in 1901, after the wave of repression had subsided in Spain because of another bombing outrage that I talk about in my book, Anarchist Inquisition.
Was that the crazy wedding one with the flowers? And
that one's later. We'll get to that one later.
There's so many, though.
I know. Well, the one that I'm referring to is in 1896. There was a religious procession at a church in Barcelona. Someone threw a bomb. Well, actually, no, they didn't throw it. If we want to be precise, it was a bomb on the street. They lit a fuse.
Okay.
But it exploded, and the authorities, to this day, still no one definitively knows who did it. But of course, the authorities blamed the anarchists. And arrested somewhere around 700 or 800 people.
God damn.
If this sounds familiar,
it does.
It's, like anyone that was not only an anarchist, but maybe you might say anarchist aligned. Socialists, free thinkers, anti-clericals, people who didn't baptize their kids, all sorts of people.
I can't believe that the fucking the national security memorandum of Trump has essentially revived anti-clerical terror as a concept with this like anti-Christian bit he threw in. Blowing my goddamn mind.
Yeah, for people who have studied authoritarianism and state repression over the generations, like it's all just so transparent, and it's so weird to walk around and see so many people who don't get it. But
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
We're doing this.
Yeah, we're doing this. So anyway, there was a whole protest movement against this, and when push came to shove, a lot of those people ended up getting out of prison. Some of them fled abroad. Some of them were executed. But anyway, by 1901, when Ferrer comes back, and we'll talk in a moment more about the circumstances of his leaving, there's more political space. And the profile of propaganda by the deed in Spain is also sort of diminished. And there are these spaces where there's a shift towards more unionism and creating like what were essentially anarchist info shops, although they called them Ateneos. Why did he end up going to Spain? To back up a little bit, because this is a key part of the story. Mm-hmm. When he was in France, he initially opened a restaurant. It didn't work out great.
Yeah.
And so he turned towards teaching Spanish to French people.
I feel
right.
him. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know, right? Like how much plus ça change. But he got his clients through the Masonic lodge he was involved with, because he became a very high-profile Mason.
Sure.
And one of them, Ernestine Munier, was a very wealthy and very conservative initially. As an aside, because I know that this is the kind of podcast where, we take our time, we get into interesting historical details.
Oh, hell yeah.
Let's throw this in, right? How did she what was her wealth, right? Apparently her father was very involved in the process known as Haussmannization. Are you familiar with that, Fritz?
Is it tiny homes?
No. So basically, 19th century Paris, the city government.
Oh, Haussmann.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so I heard Haussmannization. This is like the opposite of tiny homes. This is the large boulevard.
But isn't that's the name of the next book?
Yeah.
From Haussmannization to Haussmannization.
There we go. That's it.
Urban history, right?
No one can object to that. You see, you're in the clear.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, you're familiar, right? So they destroy working class neighborhoods. They create massive boulevards to make it easier to move troops around the city, and allegedly for like sanitation reasons. So Ernestine Munier's father makes a killing in this real estate process. And so she's wealthy, but she's very conservative. And so Ferrer starts teaching her. But although Ferrer is like a language teacher, he could never, by his own admission, be the type of person who simply could just teach grammar. He always had to be teaching politics and ideas along with it, which is evident if you check out his Spanish language grammar book, which he published in, I think it was like the late 1890s. There's like political stuff in there's political stuff in there. Like some of the texts he uses are like radical texts. I forgot the details, but
is it like I don't know? Is it like Pedro throws a rock at a cop? How many rocks has Pedro thrown?
That's sort of like some of the modern school assignments, but it wasn't quite like that. It was more like texts from radical thinkers that we're going to work through to understand the Spanish language.
This is creeping me out. Like, this is the thing, is when you are one of these dudes, one of these guys that I feel not great about admitting that I identify with Ferrer a lot more than I feel like I should sometimes. But when you're stuck out there teaching English and, that wasn't what you wanted to teach and it wasn't what you studied, you just start doing your own thing. And I can feel him here as a frustrated teacher of grammar and vocabulary, just being like,
well, if I were teaching English, I would want to give my students some interesting stuff to read.
Yes, exactly. Or you go insane.
Yeah.
In my experience.
So anyway, Ernestine Munier, father made fortune on Haussmannization, and she's conservative. So as he tells it, and I think you get a great insight into how Ferrer understood ideas in education and also gender through this phrasing.
Okay.
He basically, the quote he says is, "Over time, I toppled the fortress of her prejudices."
Oh, no.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, I know, right? And it's just kind of like, ugh.
Yeah. Just lay off, dude.
I know. This is, just to clarify, according to him, their relationship was only platonic.
Okay. Still.
One never knows.
Yeah.
This was the context of the Dreyfus affair in France. I'm sure plenty of your listeners know about what that was, but a quick gloss on that. Alfred Dreyfus was a Jewish captain in the French army who was wrongfully accused of treason. And so this kicks off this huge campaign in French society where on the left side, you've got these anti-clericals and radicals, advocating for that, saying, hey, this is anti-Semitism. And on the right, you have all the monarchists and like proto-fascists. Yeah. So he takes this opportunity to be like, look, Ernestine, look what's happening in society, talk politics. Anyway, as he says, he ends up toppling her fortress.
Oh, God. It's even grosser now. The more you say it, the worse it gets.
Yeah, okay. I know. Well, but the thing is, like, how could you not? This is who he was.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's rough.
It's just the reality of it, right? So she apparently becomes sold on an idea that he had to create a rationalist school to, make it so that the minds of young people are not, as he would see it, poisoned by superstition and religion and so forth.
Uh-huh.
So she leaves him a building when she dies in her will. It's a big, expensive building in Paris. And essentially, the school that he ends up creating, as well as some other revolutionary activities he's involved with, are funded basically from the rent from this building. He's basically like an absentee landlord for an enormous building in Paris.
Awesome.
and the
perfect anarchist hero. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing is, like, were his politics exactly anarchist? Not exactly.
No, I mean, that's the thing. He's moving through history. Like, he's going through different, networks of politics as well. We've already seen him go from Republican to the socialist, like he's
right. And I think as a quick summary, he never really leaves his earlier influences behind.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where the money comes from. He opens the school. Initially, it's not nearly as unconventional and radical as people think. And I found that out in the course of the research, that we've gotten the version of the school that he wrote about in his book, The Modern School, where he emphasizes sort of what it ended up becoming. Initially, it was pretty traditional. But even so, I think today, when most people think of anarchist pedagogy, they think of a lot of student choice, student initiative, student autonomy. There was not much of that, even at the kind of height of the school. If you look at the schedule, it was pretty like, all right, we do this, then we do that, then we do that.
Yeah, because he was also very convinced in the power of right information.
There you go. That was a great segue, right? So.
I'm professional.
Obviously, right, exactly. From the anarchist perspective, we put education aside for a moment, and we look at politics. There's a kind of a form and a content part of radical politics, and particularly anarchism, right? There are ways that we should go about making decisions, and then there are the kinds of decisions that we favor over other decisions.
Yeah.
And when it came to, there's a separate question about how that translates into teaching children, but when it comes to pedagogy for Ferrer, it was all about the content and the outcome and the belief result, and not really so much at all about the form that it took.
Yeah.
He basically viewed education as like a kind of surgical process of removing the wrong ideas and I was going to say installing, but I guess I'm not sure what the surgical metaphor, putting in the right ideas.
Well, Freire would have called it banking, I guess, right?
Yes, sure, yeah. So that was it, and there were other anarchists at the time who had diametrically opposed ideas,
right,
about learning. Like Ricardo Maya was one of the more influential ones who argued that, like, no, we're no better than the the monarchists or whatever, or the Catholics. If we just plant ideas in heads, we need to cultivate autonomy. But of course, from his point of view, that you could kind of see that, like, he was maybe indifferent is probably too strong, but like he wasn't talking about, well, if you basically let students decide for themselves in a Catholic authoritarian society, chances are most of them are going to end up agreeing with that, right? So for what it's worth, I think there's like shortcomings in both perspectives, to two extremes, I think.
Sure,
for what it's worth. But anyway, just to show that there was debate within anarchist circles about this. Oh, and one other little tidbit that I like to throw in that I forgot to mention. The idea to create the school was actually Ferrer's partner's idea, not his idea.
Why am I not surprised by this?
But he took credit for it.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. That's disappointing to hear, as somebody who was for so long blissfully ignorant about these aspects of Ferrer until I read your book.
Well, I mean, right? Kill your idols. I mean,
yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate it. This is the method. This is the method we're trying to talk about,
Yeah.
It's not just fucking banking some, hagiography into your head. We need to know that all these dudes are just like people you might have worked with yourself. I've run into plenty of Ferrers in my activist time.
Sure. Sure. But it's a funny experience doing book talks for this book, which I haven't done in a number of years. But I feel like a lot of people come in being like, oh, I want to learn all about the modern school so we can make a school just like this school.
Yeah, no.
And I'm just like, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not going to be that kind of talk.
Yeah, good. That's good, though. You're doing God's work.
Yeah, well,
so to speak. Was he like a do you know about New Thought movement?
I don't think I do. Tell me.
It's like kind of this, it comes off of the heels of that dude. His last name was Smiles. Was it like Sammy Smiles? This UK writer who was probably the first to say, if you're poor, it's because you have bad thoughts. Like you're not thinking positively enough. So New Thought movement extended out of that initial thing. We now call it The Secret. Basically,
yeah,
it's that.
Yeah,
and this was unbelievably popular around this time. So it's mostly. I think it's mostly in the Anglophonic world. So I was just curious.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I haven't come across that with the like French Spanish stuff, and I don't think he would have agreed with it because he was a structural thinker and he did believe that we needed a revolution and so forth. And so like the other kind of like element to this story is on the surface, the modern school was not an ideological school. It, tirelessly or never strayed from like scientific method of rational instruction. And
he would have hated
objectivity.
This movement, yeah, he would have hated it. They're like mesmerists,
right? Yeah. But behind the scenes, he was publishing articles under a pen name, Zero or Cero in Spanish, right, in the leading revolutionary syndicalist newspaper, which he basically paid for again with the rent money from Paris.
Fair enough.
And arguing that not only do we need a general strike, but it must be bloody. Like we can't just kind of do the classic wobbly idea of we sit and we just like put down our tools and sit there.
Yeah.
That needs to be the first step towards an armed uprising against the state. So he was, we now know, very much agitating for the kinds of actively violently revolutionary politics that he would later be accused of, but he was trying to still hold on to this public persona to allow his school to be open, of this just mild-mannered pedagogical figure. And so going back to the beginning of our conversation, that translation into English from 1913 was sort of holding on to that.
Yeah, because that was definitely how he was introduced to me, as this, guy that was killed, even though his big contribution was like teaching children and coming up with more equitable ways to do so. But yeah, he was kind of an accelerationist a little bit. He was wanting to heighten those contradictions and get.
Well, I mean, I suppose, but to be fair, like they were already pretty heightened.
Yeah, that's true.
So like it's different to make that argument when there is a legitimate case to be made that like we're on the precipice.
Yeah, that was literally the precipice. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, had Portugal fallen at that time yet to the Republicans? Had they already?
No, that was later. Well, they had a revolution in 1910. I don't remember. My Portuguese history is a little bit
sorry,
rusty. No, it's fine.
I was just thinking about the Lady of Fatima, and I'm just imagining that at this time in Spain there were probably all sorts of people seeing Mary.
Oh yeah.
Arroja la bomba que ocupa metralla, coloca petardo, empuña el estado, propaga tu idea revolucionaria, hasta que consigas amplia libertad. Acudir los anarquistas, empuñando la pistola hasta el morir, con petróleo y dinamita, toda clase de gobierno a combatir y destruir.
So we got the school. People are paying rent. It's paying for not only itself, but also for publishing anarcho-syndicalist literature, where he has taken a bloodthirsty approach to the idea of the general strike.
Yes, and he was not done there. Oh no, he was involved in more. So this is where I think we can kind of bring in a little bit of the proto-fascism conversation.
Great, yeah.
So one of his BFFs was a guy named Alejandro LaRue.
That guy, yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
He was a Republican, no? He was like a...
Yes. So
Bringing me back to your other book, actually.
He is most well known for being one of the right-wing prime ministers of the Second Spanish Republic during the middle years of the Republic, the right-wing governments around the time of the repression of the Asturias Uprising of 1934.
Uh-huh.
So, and then when he ends up siding with Franco and so forth. So he ends up on the nationalist side of the Spanish Civil War,
right,
and becomes an enemy of the left. Early on, he is this kind of firebrand Republican orator.
Yeah.
Who initially becomes really famous in the 1890s in support of the prisoners. Remember, we talked about the 800 prisoners arrested after the bombing at the the El Proceso de Montjuic. He becomes really famous in that context by writing articles in support of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But it's a little complicated, right? You ever read a pundit or a writer who's really good on one thing and is really bad on another thing?
Oh my God, yes.
So he was that in the 1890s. So he supported the working class prisoners in Spain against state repression. Okay, fine. Simultaneously was the War of Independence in Cuba.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Same time, 1890s. Cuban nationalist rebels fighting back against Spain. General Weyler is putting a lot of these Cubans in what they actually called reconcentration or concentration camps, right? So concentration camps predate the Nazis.
Well, sure.
They're putting I'm just, maybe some of your listeners don't know that, right?
True. Sorry. My listeners are just, the elite of the elite here. They know all about.
Of course, we can presume so much. I'm so used to talking to undergrads that I don't presume much.
You're talking to some real freaks now.
Yeah, right. So, so hundreds of thousands of people die in these camps. It's really bloody and awful. Alejandro Lerroux supports the Spanish state in that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because he's nationalist.
Yes. I have to say, Americans right now are getting some flack for not having easy to understand politics. Every time something fucking horrible happens and they're analyzing the politics of the person who did it, they end up with kind of nothing, or a mix of things. But that's just been true. I'm thinking about these Spanish guys, some of these French guys. You get if they had a fucking Twitter account, you'd get all sorts of shit on it.
Well, that's just, most human beings don't fall into those boxes.
Exactly.
So, Neil, and even Ferrer, who was a very theoretically engaged guy, was a mix of a few different things.
Yeah. Yes.
So Lerroux supports the Spanish state. He's a nationalist. He's also very militarist, and he adores the Spanish army. And meanwhile, we mentioned the Dreyfus affair happening in France. He is against Dreyfus, so he's also an anti-Semite.
Okay.
But he's friends with Ferrer. He after he becomes a big deal as a journalist, he moves to Barcelona. He sort of pretends like he's an anarchist, so he gets a lot of anarchist friends. And then he creates his own political party and does fairly well in the Barcelona elections, in part by running as an anti-Catalan nationalist candidate, as the Catalan nationalist thing was starting to kind of bubble up.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So he's a Spanish nationalist. He supports the Spanish state, Spanish military against to call it separatist at the time would be incorrect. It wasn't actually separatist yet, but heading in that direction, Catalan movement.
Yeah.
And so he's also friends with Ferrer. Now, 1905, 1906, there are two attempts on the life of Alfonso XIII, the Spanish king.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we walk through what happened?
Yes, we should, because it's actually quite important to his school, if I'm not mistaken, Ferrer.
It is.
Yes.
Two attempts on the life of Alfonso XIII. The first is in 1905. He is in Paris, hanging out with the French president. They go to an opera. On the way back from the opera, someone throws one or two bombs at their carriage. The king and the president are unharmed. Subsequently, a handful of anarchists are arrested and accused of this attempt. There's a reasonable amount of evidence to suggest that they did do it.
Yeah.
But they were acquitted. It seems largely because there had been so much propaganda in France about the atrocities of the Spanish state. Again, going back to those 800 people arrested and the torture and so forth, that they kind of concluded, it seems, that like, well, fuck the Spanish king.
Mm-hmm.
So they were acquitted for that kind of miraculously.
Yeah.
In the book, in the Anarchist Inquisition, I go into all the details of that, the evidence they had against them. It seems pretty clear to me that they did it. Now, there is also, I get into, this is more an Anarchist Inquisition than in the Ferrer book proper. I get into more about how basically there's some sort of circumstantial evidence to suggest that Ferrer was in on the kind of deep planning of this assassination attempt, but it's pretty sketchy, right? So like it may not be true.
But like knowing that he liked to kind of run his mouth sometimes, and knowing that he liked to be like the guy, I could see it too. I could totally I would believe it either way.
There's more reason to suspect that he was involved in the next one.
Okay.
So let's talk through that, and then we'll kind of take a step back and look at them together, right? So almost exactly a year later, Alfonso XIII was to be married. Aw.
Yeah.
He was marrying an English princess, one of the descendants of Queen Victoria. If you've been to Madrid, there's the Prado, right? They were getting married in the church right next to the Prado. If you've been there, you've seen it. It's right there.
Yeah.
And there was a young anarchist named Mateo Moral from Catalonia, the son of an industrialist, who had been involved in the publishing house of the modern school. So Ferrer's modern school was not just a school. They also published an educational newspaper, not in the sense of like a PTA newsletter where the parents can know what their kids are up to and it has like pictures of like hand paintings, but like a theoretical journal on pedagogy.
Yeah. Okay. He was also the librarian. Am I wrong?
He wasn't the librarian. He worked at the publishing house.
Okay. I think somebody called him that in some.
Sometimes I think sometimes some of the details get a little frayed. I mean, it's not like a gross distortion, but basically they published like textbooks and stuff, and he was involved in the publishing wing of the modern school. So,
I think Librarian Terrorist just evokes like a Netflix series, so I feel maybe that's why we went there.
I would watch it.
I would too. Absolutely.
So he was also involved in revolutionary syndicalist politics. He was also involved in the neo-Malthusian movement,
which is not as bad as it sounds.
It's not quite as bad as it sounds, although it's not great.
It's not great, but
it was largely a birth control movement.
Yes. Yeah.
So like Mateo Moral was involved in some of the first ever public presentations on contraception in some of these Catalan towns.
Yeah, and this was also a birth control movement, and please correct me if I got this one wrong, but as I remember, the neo-Malthusians kind of used the general acceptance of like the Malthusian panic to sort of use it as a wedge to get some sort of liberation, like some kind of feminist liberation.
Yeah, so like, Emma Goldman was kind of in those milieu.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't feel comfortable being like, oh, it was great, because it would sometimes kind of like veer into directions that I think today we would see as problematic. But
yes, the
core of it was essentially this kind of feminist reproductive autonomy kind of direction.
Yeah, that's much better put. Yeah.
So he was involved in a bunch of different stuff. He, if memory serves, and this is in Anarchist Inquisition, he was considering this kind of plot during a general strike to kidnap a bunch of bosses and like hold them as prisoners to try and pressure the state to concede to their demands or something like that. So he wasn't, revolutionary syndicalism among the anarchist movement in those first few years after 1900 was usually seen less as a kind of new institution to build and more as a kind of like quick stepping stone towards an insurrection.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's worth bearing in mind. So he was indicative of that, right?
Okay.
So anyway, he gets business cards made up under an assumed name, Manuel Martinez, as a wool merchant.
Classy.
Oh, wait. Yes, right. That's right. Wool merchant. And he tells his friends, hey, I'm going to Madrid for the royal wedding. They can connect a few dots. They don't ask too many questions. He heads out to Madrid. He gets a room at a boarding house on Calle Mayor, which, again, if you've been to the city, is one of the most historic streets in the city. It's from, like, if you look at the medieval dimensions of Madrid, it's like at the center of medieval Madrid, and has for many, probably hundreds of years, been the street where many of the most important processions happen. And today, basically, the right wing or monarchist processions, like the state monarchist processions, happen down Calle Mayor.
Look, I'm telling you, they know who they are. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's funny because there's other thoroughfares where the left do their marches, but this is not one of them.
Yeah.
So he gets a room in a boarding house, and according to the woman who runs the boarding house, he's quiet and keeps to himself. But like he had this habit of like every evening tossing oranges out the window.
What? Why?
Well, they have a certain shape and a certain weight, and he just.
I see.
He was practicing.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was lobbing oranges out the street onto the ground below.
Yeah.
Every evening, just kind of like practicing. And no one called the police on that.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, it's a guy throwing oranges. It's like, not my fucking problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so he does that for a while. And then basically when the day of the wedding happens, the royal procession goes down his street. He throws a bouquet of flowers, which has a bomb in it. It explodes near the royal carriage. The royal couple are uninjured, but a number of different bystanders and military and police are killed and injured.
Yeah.
Now, part of the reason why they noticed that where the bomb came from is that there was a decree issued that you could not throw flowers at the royal procession. If it weren't for that, then, there'd be stuff coming from all directions. No one would know where it came from. But since it was the only bouquet that came out, people noticed it.
Yes.
Morale flees immediately, manages to escape into the Madrid countryside and tries to get a job as like an agricultural worker and just kind of like blend in and disappear. But he is Catalan. So everyone's like, who is this weird guy with a Catalan accent?
Mm-hmm.
And he is the son of an industrialist. So who's this weird Catalan who has no experience in agricultural labor?
Yeah, he's got them soft hands. He's got them orange throwing hands.
Exactly. So he stood out. Eventually the police find him. They detain him, but it's not like today where you get like immediately zip tied and thrown on the ground with a boot in your neck. They basically were going to lead him, since the civil guard that found him, they were in this rural area. They didn't come in a car. There were no cars.
Yeah.
So they were going to lead him on foot back to wherever they were going to detain him. So they start walking him on foot. Morale pulls out a gun, shoots the cops, shoots himself, and that's the end of Morale.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
So Ferrer gets accused of being part of this conspiracy. There is not definitive evidence he was, but I think he was.
He's working for his publishing house and he's publishing, violent shit. I mean, you can put it together, I guess.
Well, the other piece is this. So he was friends with Alejandro Lerroux.
Yeah.
There's correspondence with various people where he says, so to take a brief step back, one of his good comrades was Charles. Well, you'd say Charles in French, but we could just anglicize and say Charles Mulatto, the anarchist in France. And after his death, Mulatto said of Ferrer that basically, he was like kind of an anarchist, but he would have been happy with basically making a republic as an interim step towards creating anarchism.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's correspondence where Ferrer says that republic should be led by Alejandro Lerroux.
Okay.
Right. And so he's basically, it seems like the plan was that they were going to have Morale blow up the king. After the king's dead, there were some plans for like a coordinated radical Republican uprising, possibly in conjunction with calls for a general strike, to create a republic in Spain with Lerroux at the head of it.
Yeah.
And that basically Ferrer's role in all of this was to sort of be a middleman between anarchists and Republicans and to finance things and kind of, he was kind of frankly, he was what Trump would like us to think George Soros is.
I was actually kind of thinking that myself. He's really like living up to that archetype here.
Yeah. Ferrer didn't have nearly as much money, but so that's the idea. Again, in the interest of precision, it's not absolutely proven that he was this person, but I believe it.
Yeah, sure. I'm with you, actually. Yeah.
So, but then again, part of that is you see the influences of different politics, the fact that he was basically willing to kind of bring propaganda by the deed and revolutionary syndicalism and this older tradition of top-down military republicanism all together at the same time to try and create a republic, which he hoped would be kind of a radical republic that could then transition maybe into anarchism. Who knows?
Yeah.
So it was a kind of a...
The point is shit gets blown up.
Yeah. But the thing is that the king doesn't die.
Yeah, right.
He survives.
Well, because of the wind, he didn't account for the wind resistance on the pedals. He's been practicing with these naked oranges like an idiot. He should have been tying some daisies to them.
Yeah, well, so the king survives. Ferrer is put on trial, and miraculously, he's acquitted.
That's fucking crazy. Yeah,
I know. I get into it more in Anarchist Inquisition, but he's acquitted, and but he realizes like stuff is kind of sketchy here. He gets out of the country.
Yeah.
When he's abroad in exile, he writes the Modern School book based on his pedagogy, because we left out a big part of it. His arrest for this attempted assassination closes the Modern School.
Ah, interesting. That's important to note too.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it never reopens. So it's around from 1901 to 1906, and that's it.
Yeah. I think that's somehow a meaningful thing for me. I mean, as somebody that has worked a long time in mutual aid, it's important to keep those spaces pretty clean, because like you're very vulnerable, even if you're just doing something like a food project. I mean, it's very easy to lose the whole thing. So that's what happened. And then basically he ends up coming back to Spain. I think it was in early 1909 because a relative is sick, and he ends up in or near Barcelona during the Tragic Week. Yeah.
So to just give a quick summary of what that is, and then we can kind of poke it a little more if you want.
Yeah.
Spain had and still has territory in Morocco.
Yeah.
And basically there was a more or less anti-colonial rising in Morocco. And so the Spanish state called up, drafted a bunch of conscripts to go fight in this war.
Yeah.
And in Barcelona, when they were ready to disembark, a bunch of them were fed up, threw their weapons down. So we don't want to go to this war. And so this kind of, initially a general strike turns into an insurrection in Barcelona primarily against conscription for this war.
Yeah, right.
So one of the slogans is like, let the rich go fight the war.
Yes.
And so it turns into this really major insurrection. Now, initially, of course, the political purpose of the insurrection is this kind of anti-war sentiment. The focus of it is more on being against the conscription than against sort of the colonial situation per se. But of course, they're connected. It becomes very strange because what ends up happening is the focus shifts from this attack on the war to an anti-clerical rising that involves the burning down of like hundreds of churches and monasteries and so forth. Yeah. So there are these photos in the book about, you can see the smoke across the skyline of Barcelona.
Yeah. There's still like, if you come from a Catholic tradition, you might even have heard about some of this. I mean, this left a scar on like the sort of Catholic mind for a while. They have their own mythology about it as well. Like you'll hear stories about, which may or may not be true, about people dancing with the corpses of nuns.
That seems to have been true.
There we go. I mean, like this really was something. This was something.
Yeah, I teach a course on the Spanish Civil War, and that entailed anti-clerical violence as well, and the outrage on the part of the Catholic Church at anti-clerical violence was, of course, a major grievance in the war. And we talk about the Tragic Week of 1909 as an important precedent to that.
Yeah.
So anyway, the political faction that was most involved in kind of promoting this anti-clerical direction were the Radical Republicans, was LaRue's political party. But he himself was in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken. Like he was out of town. So he kind of avoided a lot of the heat for this. Mm-hmm. And after the rebellion was put down, the Spanish state decided not to unleash mass repression on the populace because they kind of wanted to just move on and not create a new political problem.
Sure.
And so they ended up only executing 5 people for the rebellion. And they basically kind of let LaRue's Radical Party off the hook, institutionally speaking. But they end up blaming Ferrer for being the mastermind behind the entire uprising.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, of all the stuff to let him on, To get him on that
Right.
is ridiculous. Yeah.
Right. Now, if you look at the information available about his activities during the week, the tragedy of it is he would have very much liked to have been the mastermind.
Of course.
He tried to be the mastermind. He went to meet with all the main movers and shakers of all the different political factions.
Yep.
No one wanted to talk to him. He was, as his friend Mulatto said, too much of an anarchist for the Republicans, too much of a Republican for the anarchists. The union people kind of, it's like, oh, he's kind of bourgeois. What's up with this guy with a lot of money?
Yeah.
He also had, of course, a lot of heat on him from having been accused of trying to kill the king.
Sure.
So no one wanted to talk to him. So he just kind of traveled around trying to talk to people in the field, and then was accused of being the mastermind of the whole thing.
I've got so many open questions about that maybe aren't even knowable, but you do wonder why they gave LaRue so much room to work with, and
they being the Spanish state.
Yeah, the Spanish state. Yeah, and why? I mean, they had to know Ferrer couldn't have masterminded something this massive, But certainly they preferred.
They had a grudge against him getting off the charges from the 1906 assassination attempt.
He was also, I guess, now you're also describing him too as kind of isolated at this moment. Like, again, nobody wanted to work with him, and that does make him vulnerable and disposable as well. You can get rid of him without starting another riot.
Yeah, I mean, he had his allies, but he was always kind of, again, we're veering into, this kind of like the George Soros conversation. He was always kind of a mover behind the scenes when it came to the revolutionary syndicalism and these uprisings and so forth.
Well, yeah.
He had his people, but he was not, he was not an uncontroversial political figure,
right?
Even while he was alive. So the state had an axe to grind with him from getting off the charges earlier.
Yeah,
he was disposable, and he was sort of representative of what they wanted to target.
Yeah,
the fact that this was an anti-clerical uprising, and he was the person who created the most famous anti-clerical school.
Yes,
meant that for them it was true, even if it wasn't true.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because again, as we said, their belief in the notion that like teaching ideas makes certain behavior happen, like that's how they viewed this whole thing. It's like, oh well, of course.
Sorry, you're talking about the early 20th century Spaniards, not the early 21st century Americans, right? Just to clear that up.
It's the same argumentative structure, though.
Same, yes.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the plot arc of Ferrer's life. He's executed by firing squad in 1909. There's a huge protest movement that I think in some ways is an important kind of precedent to Sacco and Vanzetti, those protests of a bit more than a decade later, that has massive protests, including like riots and massive social upheaval in like Italy and Belgium.
Word.
Really big protests. In the Ferrer book, I talk about all the protests, Latin America, protests in the US, all over. What country was conspicuously absent from that protest movement?
Yeah, I'm guessing Spain was quiet about it.
Spain was quiet about it.
Yeah.
For some obvious reasons. I mean, part of it is they had just basically had this insurrection that got put down. A lot of the leading figures fled the country.
Yeah.
Those who were around didn't necessarily want to stick their head above water. And as I said, Ferrer was much better known. Like these ins and outs and kind of oddness of his politics were better known in Spain than abroad. So, there were so many factions that were kind of like, are we really going to stick our neck out for this guy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But in other countries, just like, oh, that's the dude who made the school. Let's go march for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they can both be kind of right too.
Well, they can both be kind of, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have protested for him. I mean, I'm sure.
But I also get tactically, like you just narrowly avoided probably a mass execution of radicals, right?
Yeah.
And this dude seems to be taking the heat. I mean, I can see them doing some calculations in their head and deciding just to like let a thing go.
Yeah. And so that protest movement kind of rolls into the modern school movement of making the schools. But of course, the people that made those schools had very little information about what a Ferrerian school should be.
Sure.
What they had was the book that he wrote, the modern school book. And, that talks about like general principles and stuff.
Right.
But unsurprisingly, in local context, people adapted that to their own kind of outlooks and politics and pre-existing traditions. And so the schools varied quite widely. The one in New Jersey that lasted for several decades was closer to being a kind of hippie school.
Sure.
And so I've met some of the former students. They used to do annual reunions. A lot of those folks have passed away, unfortunately. But, one of these guys talked about basically kind of just school was playing in the woods all day.
Huh.
And then, books were available. And when the kids wanted to learn how to read, they would say, I want to learn how to read. And then they learned how to read. So this one guy, learned how to read when he was 10 because he wanted to know what the words in the comic book said. And he learned how to read. And he ended up being an engineer.
Hell. Well,
so
fuck me then.
No, I mean that if my kids say, I don't want to learn to read until I'm 10, I'm going to say you're going to learn how to read now.
Yeah.
Because you're 7 and it's time you know how to read.
Yes.
So obviously I don't think that would work for everyone, but it works for some people. But that is the antithesis of Ferrer's outlook on information and knowledge and education.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, there's something to be said though for a vague idea kind of leaving all that space for invention open as well. I mean,
for sure.
They didn't all end up, whatever, doing underwater basket weaving. Sorry, I don't mean to be cruel, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of them went off to have their own sort of more elaborative programs.
Sure. Yeah. And then, of course, another little tidbit to throw into the mix is that when the Spanish Revolution happened in 1936, in those worker-controlled regions of the country, they put in a kind of a version of Ferrerian pedagogy, although one that was kind of a bit more working class focused and a little more like explicitly class based. But so, that's like an important legacy of this as well.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. That's great. That's great, Mark. It's really helpful to, put these things in context. I cannot stop thinking about our current situation. And I just want to put it out there that if there is some gigantic anti-clerical riot that lasts the whole week out there, Mark had nothing to do with it. All right, people, making that clear.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes. It's funny because it makes me think that I'm getting these right-wing attacks for my Antifa book.
Yeah,
and a lot of them, like, they all call me an Antifa militant.
Yeah,
and I've never been involved in any anti-fascist organizing at all.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I would have very much liked to have been. If I could go back to my 17-year-old self in New Jersey, I'd say, look, find the local ARA chapter and get involved. This is good stuff to do. But I was not.
Yeah.
So, that sense of feeling like I would like to be the person that you're accusing me of being. I'm just not quite that cool.
Well, they moved on though, didn't they? The fucking Washington Examiner was like calling you a financier. That made me laugh out loud.
Well,
that was
right because as I say in my book, a lot of this is like, they have these scoops on things that I've just published.
They're in
the
intro. It's in the intro or acknowledgments or something.
Right. Yeah. So a portion of the proceeds of the book go to the International Anti-Fascist Defense Fund. That's like a published fact. But I was saying to someone the other day, I'm Jewish. That the two kind of versions of the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory are Jews as the evil capitalist and Jews as the evil communist.
Yeah.
And so by being, as a Jewish person, called the Antifa financier, they finally managed to put them both together at the same time. They did
it. That's the singularity. I think that's what they call it.
Yes.
We have now ended history.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Well, Mark, I suppose to start, wrapping this up here, I just would like to hear from you more broadly about what you've been thinking. I mean, I'm not looking for any, final answers here, but I do tend to come to you and your writings for wisdom in dark times. And I'm going to put you on the spot here and just sort of,
that's fine.
Like, ask what you think. I mean, it's easy to freak out right now. It's easy to get very scared. There's like a sense of scale that feels new to our generation, certainly not new to past ones, but that's not us. Like, we're us now. But it's also worth reminding people that not much has happened in this national security direction yet. like there's a chance nothing will. Even there's a chance they just find it too difficult to get their weird little fictions past a judge and give up. But there's a chance they don't. And I guess I'm just wondering what you feel right now about this moment in history relative to the history of anti-fascism itself, seeing how you literally wrote the book.
How brief do you want me to be, or not?
Oh no,
brief?
it's I know you've got to go soon.
No, it's not about that. It's just that, like, there is a bunch to say. Let me just say a bunch of stuff, and then you can include what you want.
I'm here for the ride.
Yeah. Well, so before Trump started this administration, this term, I thought to myself, like, okay, there's a lot of talk about this being fascism coming. How can I, as a scholar, create some kind of historically informed criteria in advance to assess how close or far we are from it, like in advance, that I can kind of measure as we go along?
Okay.
And so I came up with three main things, which are related but distinct. The first is the reduction of the sphere and meaningfulness of rights. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think that there have been steps taken in that regard. Looking at how the administration has tried to make the case that undocumented people don't have a right to due process, which is, of course, constitutionally untrue.
Trans people don't have a right to kind of anything.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, so there definitely have been steps towards making it so that rights are a thing for fewer people, and that for those who have them, they're less meaningful and less robust.
Sure.
Right. So there have been steps in that direction. Obviously, though, they haven't gone all the way yet. The second thing is the creation of parallel institutions.
Right.
So, for example, take the Nazis, right? The Gestapo, the concentration camp system. Those are under the auspices of the Nazi Party, not under the normative state, right? They're under the prerogative state. They kind of went around the pre-existing German state.
ICE is tricky there, right? Because that's
the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not technically a parallel institution,
right?
But with the massive funding they're getting,
Yeah.
with the fact that they are increasingly functioning outside any meaningful civilian oversight.
It's kind of evolved into one, huh?
It's taking steps in that direction. The immigrant detention centers, if you read accounts by lawyers or rights advocates, that, their clients have disappeared. They can't get in touch with them. Abuse is rife.
Oh, yeah.
People are getting deported to El Salvador or wherever around the world.
Yes.
So it's not a parallel institution, but it does feel like it could potentially function like one.
I think the masks are kind of a signal that it sees itself as one, because that was an initial jump, right? You're not supposed to wear masks as law enforcement unless you're doing some fucking infiltration.
And we can't admit the fact that it's informed by Proud Boys and far right groups who have developed that aesthetic.
Yes, of course.
It's not only an aesthetic; it's also like a useful strategy for not being identified.
Yeah.
There's been recent reports of the border czar, Tom Homan, meeting with a local Proud Boy. I mean, that may end up being not much. But,
can you imagine what that conversation sounded like aesthetically?
God, right?
Just listening to that.
Yeah. So again, I don't want to overstate the case, but there have been steps taken in the direction of creating a kind of armed force connected to a system of detention outside of normal legal jurisdiction, which is one of the hallmarks of a concentration camp system. And there are some leading scholars of the history of concentration camps have likened them to concentration camps.
Sure.
So those are steps, but we're not all the way there. And then the third thing that I thought of was basically the emergency/fascist producing crisis. And they've tried to make the case that we have such crises. If you look at the justification for the stuff with migration, we're allegedly being invaded.
Washington, LA, Portland, Chicago. Yeah.
Right. The justification for tariffs, everything they frame in terms of an emergency. Of course, they're not real emergencies.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I kind of think about how the historical fascists had the real Soviet Union. The Cold War context mattered. At this point, it feels like Trump is trying to cobble together an emergency out of Antifa and pronouns and feminism and immigrants and like a emergency by committee. But my concern is, what if we have a real emergency?
What if, for instance, you start a war with Venezuela?
Something like that. The economy is not doing great. We could have another depression. There could be a natural disaster. It could some combination thereof, where, the argument that strong measures need to be put into place becomes a lot more convincing to a lot more people.
Yeah.
And then in that context, you can see how the other two factors could kind of suddenly exacerbate themselves. And so that's my concern is that, yeah, on the one hand, like his executive order that Antifa is a terrorist organization is legally meaningless. For what it's worth,
Yeah.
I spoke with a lawyer about it. I was like, should I be concerned? They said, look, the law as it exists right now is such that you have nothing to be concerned about.
Right.
But they emphasized as it exists right now.
Right.
And so that's the kind of the duality of this is that, you know, it's different if we're talking about undocumented people, right? It's different if we're talking about transgender people. That they're of course on the front lines of this. But for like myself as like a cis white dude history professor, sure, there's a lot of noise, but I'm still just having a relatively pleasant afternoon speaking with my friend Fritz.
Yeah.
But it's not hard to imagine, especially if you study the history of authoritarianism, how this could change, and it could change quickly. The one other thing that I'd say on the subject is I think this is a really interesting and possibly to some extent unprecedented time in the history of anti-fascism, because, you know, the kind of anti-fascism of militant anti-fascist groups, Antifa groups, and so forth was a preventative anti-fascism of trying to keep small and medium-sized far-right groups from being able to influence the halls of power. Mm-hmm. And so when I published my Antifa book in 2017, I focused on those circumstances like Germany prior to 33, you know, Spain prior to Franco taking over and so forth, because I likened it to those circumstances, but we're clearly beyond that point.
Yeah.
But we are not. So there's like a blueprint. There's a historical blueprint for preventative anti-fascism that I think is reasonably successful. There's another blueprint. There's the blueprint for like the Spanish Civil War or World War II. But we're not at that point yet either.
Yeah.
We're somewhere in the middle. And there's not a whole lot of historical precedent for being in between those two things. And so I think that's kind of interesting in a way that, you know, we're going to have to, I guess, write a new chapter to answer this crisis.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm hoping that the work on this show overall can help participate in that search. You know, Americanism is its own thing, and it has a unique history and also unique methods of getting itself across, and that's all part of this. Well, Mark, I don't know if you made me feel better or worse, but I do feel wiser, which is all I can ask for.
Well, we'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Hope to have you back on at some point. And, you know, even if they're not coming for you, stay safe, because these fucking Washington Examiner idiots and Andy, those guys, I mean, they love you. What would they do? Well, what would they even do if you like weren't doing your work, you know?
Well, you know, they've gone to great lengths to talk about like the Antifa aligned and so forth. And here I am, just a sitting duck that they can just smack the label with, even though ironically I'm not actually someone who's done any of that stuff. Yeah. I just write about it and talk about it.
Yeah, you're both the best and worst target here.
Yeah.
So that's a strange position to be in, and one that very much suits our era.
Yep.
All right. Well, Mark, thanks a lot, and we'll talk again soon.
Take care.
Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Mercenarios y fascistas, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Mercenarios y fascistas, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. El ejército del Ebro, rumba la rumba la rumba la. El ejército del Ebro, rumba la rumba la rumba la. La otra noche el río cruzó, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. La otra noche el río cruzó, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Ya las fuerzas invasoras, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Ya las fuerzas invasoras, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Buena paliza le dio, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. buena paliza les dio. Ay, Carmela, ay, Carmela. En los frentes de Granada, rumba la rumba la rumba la la. En los frentes de Granada, rumba la rumba la rumba la la. No tenemos días lunes, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. No tenemos días lunes, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Y tenemos días martes, rumba la rumba la rumba la la. Y tenemos días martes, rumba la rumba la rumba la la. Con los tanques y granadas, ay.